everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents Hometown Haunts. And I have with me Christina Wald and Jen Koehler. And I am your host, Kat Klockow, forgetting everyone's names left and right. So, and also I want to say happy birthday, Christina.
Oh, thank you. Getting well established in my crondom.
Yes. I want to welcome everyone for coming back for episode 2. We have a lot to talk about. First, Christina, you have news about our Kickstarter and also our Discord at the X's Crossroads. So, Cartoon Crossroads Columbus.
That's what it is. And that's where the X is. Columbus, or Cartoon Crossroads Columbus. And we will edit this so it sounds like we knew what we were talking about.
Sure.
Yes, this week would have been CXC, and we were hoping to really push our book, which looks amazing, by the way. All the art's in.
It's so good. It's so pretty, everyone.
I know.
There's so many flaming skulls.
Well, yes, that's the biggest selling point, I think.
Yes, the flaming skulls. We should make a sticker.
A
flaming skull
why did
sticker.
We not think of that till now? Well, I think a flaming skull sticker is what we're going to do, because you can never have too many of them. So our Kickstarter is approved, and we are going to launch it a week from today. So next Monday will be our launch party on our episode, and we'll be talking about all the different rewards and that sort of thing. So right now, if you want to get information, we have a link in the show description where you can get information sent to you when it goes live and back it. Yay! The book looks really good. Like I said, all we need to do is print it, and actually there will also be a digital version of it. But if you get the print version of it, we're making cool stickers. There's a lot of really nice options on the Kickstarter. So
yes.
Check that out as soon as it's available. And we have a gorgeous cover by Tom Miller, and who is a well-known fantasy and science fiction artist. He actually used to work at Ralph Partha, and he's done lots of different science fiction artwork. He's been doing stuff for Amazing Stories lately, and of course our Amazing Stories. Our back cover is done by Eamon Hill and looks really amazing too. So it's just like beautiful. And then inside the stories. So I hope everybody will pick it up, because it's a really good read, I think. And I'm not biased.
Yeah. No, it's a really good, you can tell everyone put a lot of heart and soul into these comics that they all created for it. And also Tom's work on the cover is fantastic. He does a great representation of Cincinnati haunts. And then Eamon's, I love his illustration of the Loveland Castle that's on the cover, or back cover. And it will be fun. I know Christina and I also have reward tiers where you can get sketches that we're doing of monster. Well, I'm doing monsters, or I guess whatever people want, but I like monsters. So
I don't know. Cryptids sounded like something fun to sketch. So
yeah, cryptids are always fun. Like, you got random hair. I like drawing hair and teeth and tentacles and claws and scales.
It's kind of a nice diversion, because my day job, a lot of times I'm painting animal books. Yeah. And it's nice to do cryptids because they're sort of animal fusions.
Yes.
And sometimes when I'm doing school visits, I'll do cross animals, where we'll say mix a lion and a parakeet, and the kids love it. Like, I'll say, what do you want me to draw? And we'll do combinations. And that's always really, kids love watching you draw live and do really weird creatures. So I think it's a really fun aspect.
Yeah.
But so the Kickstarter's heating up, and, this is a great book. So I hope everybody will look at it. We also have videos about each of our locations on our YouTube that we've made, where Kat explains the secret behind each location. We're going to talk about one of the locations tonight in depth.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
And that should be really interesting.
Yeah, so I did voiceover work. Christina did the camera work for a lot of these locations. And I gave the very quick history rundown. Like, for Cincinnati Music Hall, my goodness, our quick history was easily 2 minutes, 3 minutes long.
And that was edited down.
And that was, So that one has a lot of history to it, but yeah, they're fun.
We
And
could do
if
a
you
season
just
on Music Hall.
yes. Yeah, we could. It's a fun book. I'm the editor, so I'm a bit biased, I guess, but it's fun. It's very full of Cincinnati folklore, but you don't have to be from Cincinnati to really appreciate our Loveland Frogman or the Mermaids or our ghosts in old music halls. You have a lot of, I'm going to say, good Midwest hauntings. So,
and then also as part of CXC, since they can't have it live, obviously, we are going to be doing a sort of live chat on Discord. I'm doing one Friday at 2 and Sunday at 1, and I will also post links for that if you want to hear us talk about the anthology. I think at least Rodney might be with me on one of them, or maybe both. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about my webcomic on Friday, which is Embrace the Crone. Lots of crony goodness. But I will also put links for that in the description.
Speaking about our Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities comics anthology, we can talk about the Sedamsville Rectory, which is part of the Sedamsville neighborhood just west of Cincinnati. And this is the story that I worked on because I have investigated, as in ghost hunted, this location a number of years ago. Now, the location is no longer open. I know up until at least 2016, it was available for ghost hunts and overnight stays. It used to be on Airbnb for a while. It's an interesting location.
Airbnb?
I think it was listed on Airbnb for a hot minute back like last year or 2 years ago. So
the supernatural edition.
Yeah, well, a lot of them, that's how they book, is through Airbnb. It's an easy way. I stayed at the David Stewart Farm in Gettysburg, which was a Confederate field hospital. Oh, wow. And I booked it via Airbnb and also had a whole lot of paranormal experiences on the David Stewart Farm. So I stayed in the surgeon's room.
So did you stay the night at the rectory?
I did not, because I lived locally, so I just was there most of the night and went home. So I was there easily from like 5 p.m. until 3 in the morning, 2 nights in a row. But my friends actually stayed on the property while we were there. So the history of Sedamsville. So Sedamsville was established in 1795 by a Revolutionary War veteran, Cornelius Sedum, which I just love his name, Cornelius. The Industrial Revolution brought a whole lot of prosperity to the neighborhood, but because it's right on the Ohio River, it tended to flood a lot. And with the Great Depression and the widening of Route 50, it wiped out a good chunk of the neighborhood. So the neighborhood just slowly climbed up the hill, basically, away from the river. What our focus today is on Our Lady of Perpetual Help Parish, which was the backbone of Sedamsville for a good chunk of its history. It was established in 1878 for the German-speaking Catholics who desired to have a school in an area of their own. And the original school and church were along the Ohio River, but due to flooding, they pushed it up onto the higher part of the hill. And they built a new church in 1889 and on Steiner Avenue. And in 1890, they started the rectory's construction and finished in 1891. The school was completed in 1907. Of course, being the 1800s in Cincinnati and the Industrial Revolution, we had a lot of tragic deaths, a lot involving trains. And then this one was in the 1880s. Father Donald McLeod, who is famous for writing the history of the Roman Catholicism in North America, died outside the rectory after being hit by a train. Now, he was initially hit by a slow-going train, enough though to cause enough brain damage that he died outside the rectory. However, there are records, it's been rumored that they had several other priests die of natural causes at the rectory. The parish was also rumored to be where problematic priests in the Cincinnati diocese would be relocated so that they would stop harassing their parishioners. So, and there's one very notable one that I am not going to mention by name, but he did live at Sedamsville Rectory for a while. In 1976, due to declining enrollment, the school was closed, and 13 years later, in 1989, the entire parish was closed and absorbed into Holy Family Parish in East Price Hill. The building sat abandoned, and that's where Michael Vick and his dog fighting ring came in. They actually hosted dog fights in the basement boiler room. I've been down in that boiler room. I've seen the cage that they built and the reinforced steel door that they used. Every surface of the basement and first floor and second floor is clawed up. The closets are clawed out. You can see teeth marks everywhere. And actually, when I visited, it was still considered not an active crime scene because people could obviously get in, but the police and detectives would come in once in a while to collect more evidence. A lot of it was in the basement. There actually were some old wire crates still in the basement when I visited. Paranormal activity has been reported at both the rectory and in the former school from people that I talked to that lived in the area. The school was notably more haunted than the rectory. The rectory seems to have gotten more popular in the past decade as a haunted location. It may be because it was easier to get into because you could reserve it on Airbnb or whatever other reservation method that you had. The apparitions that are seen most often are Father McLeod walking up Steiner Avenue, as well as a ghost of a small boy or a small child and another adult male who were thought to have died on Steiner Avenue. How? I don't know. Disease, gunshots, another train accident. You know those trains, they're just everywhere. But they've been seen walking up and down. The ghosts of dogs have been witnessed walking through the hallways, especially the upstairs hallway, peering into dimly lit rooms, and the apparition of a former priest has been seen several times around the first floor, especially in the library and main hallway. Paranormal investigators have reported being attacked by unseen forces, scratched by unseen entities, pushed, incidents of lost time, the sounds of knocking on the walls and footsteps around the hallways. And in my case, I witnessed a doppelganger there, which is one of those very rare paranormal experiences that usually is saved for only the most special places like Waverly Hill Sanatorium.
Yeah.
So what was your reaction? Did you realize what you were looking at when you first saw it?
No. So you want me to
Yes.
Okay, we'll start. I just looked kind of the etymology of doppelganger, and I'm sorry, all of our German-speaking listeners, I am totally butchering doppelganger, but that's how we pronounce it in the United States. Anyway, so a doppel literally just means double, and ganger means walker or goer. And they are a loan word, but English actually does have a word. It's called a fetch, which is for an apparition of a living person, which is what a doppelganger basically is. So we no longer use fetch anymore unless we're listening to Mean Girls, but that's the old term for a apparition of a living person. And it's been recorded we have a lot of accounts of those types of apparitions going on in at least European history, but they really kind of are everywhere. So going on with my personal experience, I'm changing some of the names of my friends that I was there with just because for confidentiality, but there were 5 of us that night. So in the Anthology installment, it's actually just a very condensed version of my 2 nights there. So it's based on true events for the Anthology. I am now going to tell you my version of events. Both the 2 of the other members of our group have also on media talked about their experience. So in my story, there's Becca and Jerry, and then myself. So I only limited it to 3 characters just for ease of reading, but we actually had 2 other people. We had Carrie, and we also have Ruth. We'll go with Ruth. And so I got there, it was a Friday, Saturday night investigation, and I had been invited by Becca and Jerry because we all work in the paranormal as authors, and they had the opportunity and took the opportunity to rent the Sedamsville Rectory for the entire weekend. And they're not from Cincinnati, so they are just doing dark tourism basically of the location. And and then Ruth and Carrie were from Indiana, but we all knew each other because we've seen each other at other events. So I get there around 5 p.m. We order pizza. Jerry has to go get the pizza because at the time no one would actually deliver to the area. It's not, at the time it was not, it was a pretty rough area. I think it's gotten better because you were just there, Christina.
It felt pretty abandoned, actually.
Yeah, now
it looks like it could be a really neat area to revitalize.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the trains are by the river because it's on a steep incline.
It's a very steep incline. So we get there, we have dinner, we do our first night. Friday night's investigations actually were really boring. Most paranormal investigation is very boring. Most paranormal investigation, what we find are raccoons or possums. That's usually what we find in people's homes. It's I can't tell you how many times I have been to an investigation where we've had living raccoons in ductwork. So that was not the case here, but there just wasn't a lot going on. You'd occasionally hear a car go by. It was, for lack of a better term, pretty dead. But the interesting thing about particularly haunted locations is they don't ever perform on command. So you could be there for an entire week and nothing would happen, but it does tend to slowly build energy. And I will note that there was only one male in our group. It was Jerry. The rest of us were all females. And you have 4 females and 1 male in an old priest rectory. Things may start getting a little weird, paranormal speaking. So the next night, Saturday night, I get there and I brought food that time, and we have dinner and we start the investigation. And the rectory is an interesting building because basically the hallway just splits it right in 2 on both the first and second floors. And the north side of the building always felt very comfortable and jovial almost. And the south side, which is where the parlor rooms were, felt very heavy and depressing. And like I said, we had investigated, and Jerry actually had an incident of lost time. He reported it when I arrived on Saturday afternoon. And basically, he went into the basement, and for him, this is how he explained it. He goes down to the basement and was there for 5 minutes looking around and then came back up. But according to Becca, he had been gone, like just standing in a daze for an hour or so. Like, he didn't recall that at all. And very uncharacteristic of them, because Becca and Jerry are 2 of the most down-to-earth people that you can investigate with. Very no-nonsense, very analytical, and I like investigating with them. So we used a few different ITC devices. Those are devices that you use to try to communicate with the dead. I use an Ovilus. At the time, I had something that was experimental that was before the Ovilus was made. I called it the Yodeler because it would use phonics to actually make words instead of having pre-programmed words. So whomever you were talking to had to use their own phonics to be able to speak. So in that case, you can actually get not just English, you could get it in different languages. So I've had responses in Japanese and Chinese and stuff when, or even Spanish when using the yodeler. So we were there, and in this case, it spoke English to us, but we got in touch with a recently deceased former investigator we all knew, which was very interesting and touching. And then our night got very weird. So I will say I've been investigating for over a decade now, different locations. Um, Most of the time, I don't expect anything to happen other than raccoons and possums. And anything greater than that is going to be a much more interesting night. And we're sitting around in the dark, waiting for something to happen. And I look over into the hallway, and at that time, we were in the upstairs room that has a couch. I believe it leads into the servants' quarters up into the attic. And it looks like it was just actually a lounge area for the priests at the time, or another bedroom. And it's a room that had two doors, one into the main upstairs hallway and one into the servants' staircase to go up, or not even servants, it was just a staircase going up into the attic. And I'm sitting on the couch, I look over into the main hallway, and I watch the apparitions of two very defined pit bulls walk past the door. And one of them looked directly in at us. It did not have red glowing eyes. I was kind of disappointed, but it looked directly at us, sniffed, and then continued walking. And you can see the little tail whip, or the whip of their tail as they walked by. And I mean, you could see they had very large blocked heads. You can see their orbital crest at the very top, and their ears, but they weren't pointed. They looked like they had been clipped a little bit or bitten off. They're kind of jagged. They weren't bloody. They were just ghostly pit bulls that had seen a thing or two in their lives. And I point this out. I was the only one who saw them. We did start getting some weird mumblings over one of the ITC devices. Then, when we moved into the southern side of the house, into one of the upstairs bedrooms, we got a very loud "get out." It was more like a metal band sang it, like "get out," like that.
Ooh.
Yeah, that made all of us wake up, because suddenly you have that adrenaline because something has growled at you that was very obviously
Now,
human.
what time was the get out?
Around 10 p.m. So fresh. It was early in the evening. Because when you do so many investigations, you get used to staying up till 3. So 10 is just like, that's so easy. So that, of course, was concerning, but all of us are veteran, I almost said illustrators, investigators. So we're just like, okay, something's here, but that doesn't mean to actually get out. It means now we actually do our work. And so we pressed it for more information, and it just said get out a few times, made more grunts and stuff. And then out of nowhere, it just, I'm going to use a word. We can bleep it out with a goat sound if we want. It said, "Becca's a whore," over the speaker. And Becca immediately whips, and she's just like, "What did you just call me?" And Jerry's just like, "Calm down." It's just
Wow.
egging you on. And she's just like, "There was no need to call me that. We've just met." And he was just like, "No, we're going to keep working at this. We're getting somewhere," which is true. When you start getting action like that from, wow, that sounded weird. Uh, when you start getting vocalizations like that from ITC devices, that means you're getting somewhere and kind of interviewing whomever is there. We started seeing orbs, which were self-illuminating balls of light going up and down the hallways. And that was crazy. I've only seen it in one other location that I've investigated, and that was at a funeral home in Indiana. And we follow it out of the room, and because when you see something paranormal happening, you follow it when you're investigating. And we go down the stairs, and I look into the library, and all the lights are off, but there's so much ambient light from the outside street lights that you don't need lights. You can see everything pretty well. We get down the stairs, and right at the foot of the stairs to your left is the entrance into the library. And standing there with these huge mutton chops was a priest. I don't know who he was. What actually caught my attention was his super shiny patent leather shoes. Like, there were those like wingback type shoes. They were very shiny because they caught my attention, and I look up and it was just inky darkness, and then you can see the white of his collar and then his gray mutton chops. And he had short hair that was kind of parted to the side like mine, and pushed to the side. So he was definitely an older gentleman, but not so old that he couldn't stand straight. He was easily 6 foot because he was barely fitting into the door frame. And he was wearing small spectacles that were circular, kind of reminded me of John Lennon almost, with the types of glasses that he was wearing. And then he realized that I had noticed him and immediately stepped backwards and went into the darkness. And I was just like, did anybody else see him? And no one else, of course, saw him, because that's how ghosts go. One person at a time tends to see them. So spooky. It was very spooky. We took a break, kind of composed ourselves, because we had already a lot of paranormal activity for just about 2 hours worth of time. So around midnight, we start working again, and we're just on the first floor. And nothing happened in the library, nothing was happening in the dining room, which are all on the north side of the building. But when we went into the parlors, both the formal and the men's parlor in the back, things started getting really weird. We started seeing a shadow person walking around on the first floor, which is pretty common in haunted locations. It's a pretty commonly reported thing, which is basically, it looks like a person walking around, but they're a shadow and light can't pass through them. I run into a lot of them in this line of work. And so we see him. Becca looks around the hallway, doesn't see anybody, doesn't see anyone outside. Like we mentioned earlier, it's not exactly a well lived in area. It's a lot of abandoned properties, so no one's really around. So we are in the formal parlor, which is across from the kitchen. Is what I called the former parlor anyway. And if you can imagine, there are 2 sitting chairs that are in either corner, and I'm looking directly at the main hallway. So it's myself and Jerry are on these individual chairs. And then Becca is in a chair facing away towards Jerry. And then Carrie and Ruth, who have been pretty quiet this entire time, were sitting across from me, and they were also looking into the building or towards me. So we have the lights off, yet again, lots of ambient light, and we're just asking questions. Nothing is coming through on the ITC, but according to Becca, who's sitting just diagonally across the room from me, it looks like this gigantic shadow person is leering over me with their hands like this, like they're trying to choke me. And that I got goosebumps remembering that. And I was just like, okay, no, that's not cool. Pretending to choke someone is just not cool. We're not going to do that kind of stuff. But it kind of upset Ruth and Carrie enough, along with all the rest of the phenomena we had witnessed, that they wanted to turn the lights on and end the evening. So we turned the lights on, we end the evening, and Becca was busy with Ruth in that main hallway. So they're in this hallway in between the kitchen hallway and then the parlor where we're at. And I'm just talking to Jerry, just about stuff, like that movies we had seen or something. And I watched Ruth walk back into the room towards Carrie, and Carrie was kind of loosely listening to what Jerry and I were talking about. And Becca is still in the hallway, and she's writing something in a book, like a notebook, on one of the heaters. It's like a, oh, what is it? It's a heater, basically, that was against the wall. And it wasn't turned on, so it wasn't hot. And she was writing something in a notebook. And out from the front of the building, so basically where the staircase is, another Ruth walks up to Becca and starts talking to her. And Becca has her head down. She's actually not looking at Ruth. But I'm watching this Ruth, and this Ruth has her back turned to me and her arms up like this. So I actually didn't see her hands. But she was wearing the exact same ghost hunting vest that Ruth had been wearing, had the same haircut, the same straight cut jeans, the same tennis shoes, everything that Ruth was wearing, but I couldn't see her face because her back was to me. And Jerry notices that I'm making like this really weird face, like something's not right. And I look at this Ruth, and then I look at the other one, and then the flag kind of goes up in my head, and I kind of smack Jerry, and I'm like, Jerry, how many Ruths are there? And he looks, he's like, Becca! Because Becca's having this full-on conversation with Ruth number 2. And she looks up, and as she looks up, the thing turns away so that Becca couldn't see its face and walks towards the front door and fades into the hallway.
Wow.
So by then it's about 1 a.m. And that just... yeah, there's a siren. That just alarmed everyone. And as much as I really wanted to go back and see what was going on, it had unnerved enough of our group that they were just like, we are going to leave now. We are going to lock up, and we're not going to come back. And that's basically what happened. We locked up. They went back to, I think they slept in their car that night, but that isn't confirmed. So.
Oh, because they were allowed to sleep there, right? And
yes.
So they couldn't. Wow,
yes.
That's one creepy story.
So, yeah.
Nope.
That is my doppelganger story. I live to tell the tale. I do have a little addendum to go with that story. So 2011 was when we adopted my dog Wheatley, and he was a puppy, and he was potty training at the time. So I get home from this investigation, and it's, of course, by this time it's 2 a.m, so I let him outside because his little bladder was going to explode. And as I'm walking through my house, I walk through a spider web field. Now, anyone who's actually been an investigator knows when you walk through the spider web, it feels like you walk through a clammy, cold spider web, and it just kind of gets onto your skin, and it's one of the indicators that something has maybe followed you home. And so I let Wheatley outside, and he looks alarmed, like something is in the house that he doesn't recognize. And I turn around to inky darkness that is my house, and I'm like, whomever has followed me home, get out. You're not allowed to be here. You're not supposed to be here. Go back to Sedamsville where you belong. That's where you're supposed to be. Not in my house in the middle of Cincinnati, scaring my dog. You're not supposed to do that. And we didn't have any problems after that, after I just basically read it. It's right. Let's get out.
What was your question that you had, Jen?
Breathe.
I'm not going to sleep tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh.
I can't remember. It was something about the conversation with Ruth number 2.
Yeah, I don't know what it was because it was between Becca.
Voice?
Becca said it sounded exactly like her.
Oh, that's terrifying. Okay.
Yeah. So
remind me not to go ghost hunting with you.
Oh no, go ghost hunting with me.
No,
I guarantee you will see a raccoon.
See, that
Maybe
would
a
be my
possum.
worst fear is bringing something home.
It's happened. That was I got. Usually they get as far as my car. Like I had one kicking the back of my seat once. And I was just like, in my best, this was when I was very young, and in my best Shatner impersonation, I'm like, you will stop kicking my seat. Go out of the car, henceforth.
So
Like that.
do entities usually listen to you when you say, is that considered a way to get rid of an entity when you tell them they're not?
It's worked for me.
I mean,
A
is
lot
that
of
also
it,
part of the perception of something? Like
it's a
perhaps
lot of the intent. So with like prayer and magic work, it's the intent behind the words, not necessarily just the words. So if you order something to get out and you thoroughly mean just like get out of my house, that usually works if you're dealing with a human entity and some non-human entities. If you're dealing with jinn, they may not actually listen because they don't have to. I love dealing with jinn. They're fun.
Now we've curled.
We need to go out and have a beer. If Coke wasn't a thing. Oh my god.
We could do a socially distant beer where we're like 20 feet apart.
We could scream
Scream
stories about Jen. Well, and you could just be talking to me, Jen. They wouldn't know.
Jen or Jen.
Jinn. Yeah, genies, Jinn. But I've run into one, and yeah, that was fun. So, different story, different time.
I mean, this was a really fascinating, and it seems like it made quite an impression on you.
It did.
Still.
Yeah, I remember the night quite vividly, and it was especially that red flag moment when it basically the marching band came. Illustrator here. The marching band came playing through with big red flags going, this isn't right, something's wrong. This isn't right, something's wrong. Like that. So
well, it's interesting because it seems like, when you look at old houses, for example, a lot of things have happened in them. But is in your studies, is it necessarily that being old is what does this, or is that sometimes you get some entity that decides it likes this place? Like it could be a newer place too, probably too. I mean, yes. It just depends what energy gets brought there, right?
Yeah, so it's like trauma to a location. So with Sedamsville, you had a lot of trauma in a location, both internal and external. So you had flooding, you had the Great Depression, you had random traumatic deaths around the property, and then you had the potential of assault on minors happening in the building, and then you had the assault of dogs on dog or human on dog happening on the property. So there was just a lot of trauma there to begin with. I've been in historic homes where I will walk through and be like, yeah, this place is cool. I totally have a beer here, no problem. And then I've been to places where I'm like, yeah, things feel not quite right, very tense. But also when, at least with me, when I'm investigating, I take into account what kind of allergens can be in the air as well and cause a lot of problems. Because I have asthma. So if I inhale a lot of mold, like when I was at Pennhurst, that would make me see things. So I bring a lot of inhalers when I'm actually in places like that.
It's interesting.
Yeah, so you have to be very aware, like how much asbestos is in the air. So yeah, so that brings me to our next topic of discussion, which would be the Dent Schoolhouse.
Yay! All right, okay. I can't follow that. Oh my
Dent
God.
Schoolhouse is weird. It's been stumping all of us.
It really has.
As a researcher, I love puzzles. This is why I'm in this line of work. I just love the human enigma puzzle and trying to figure out timelines. So I know we were messaging each other earlier, and if you could have seen my geeky face going, oh, I found whoever lived there, whoever owned the property in 1970. I've got the name. Like, I'm that dork who gets excited over history. So
you would get along well with my friend Jeff, because I was texting him last night. I'm like, Jeff, because we have spent hours in the Inquirer Library talking about history and all sorts of things. I'm like, didn't we have a conversation years ago that basically said that it wasn't a true story about the ongoings at Dent with Charlie and the murdered children? But
Charlie and the murdered children.
Coming to a rock nothing.
2022.
Yeah, there's nothing. No one has ever done a story on whether or not it's true. And I don't know.
That's what bugged me so much about this case, was no legend tripping or just looking for the truth. And albeit in the time we allowed it, we didn't have enough time to really sink our teeth into the history.
Right.
But I found it super weird that I could not easily find photos of classes from Dent Schoolhouse or subdistrict number 12. There was no photos, no teacher photos, but Christina, you did find one mention of a man who taught there. No class photos, no yearbooks that were easily accessible, which is weird because it closed in 1950. And I know there were yearbooks. There had to be yearbooks.
Well, yeah. In that where the haunted house is now, that was an actual school at some point, or was it always something different?
It's always been it was a school from like
the beginning.
So should we give a rundown? Do you want to give a rundown of what you got, and then we can discuss history?
So according to the Hamilton County Auditor's website, it was built in 1900. And from what we found, the school was started in 1849. And that's what Fright Site says.
1849 or 94? Or 94.
94. I might have messed that up. Sorry.
All right. Numbers.
Something. It's one of those two.
I think it was 94.
But basically, 94 is correct. The story is that the janitor, Charlie, there were some problem students, and it was like 1942 to 1952. He kidnapped multiple children and murdered them. And they didn't find them until there was a stench coming out of the basement at the school, and then they went down in the basement and found all these dead bodies.
Right.
And because at first they were just missing children.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I can tell, that story is not true. But I don't really think it matters because people believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just adds to the experience of going through the haunted house.
Right. It has a lot, listening to it, as a recurring murder that happened in 42, 45, 52, 55.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, well, hello, Stephen King missing you. And then it also, with finding bodies, it reminded me of Ed Gein a little bit. Also reminded me, I think it was Dahmer who stuffed bodies.
Gacy.
Gacy. So, and Kemper.
Kemper. Yep.
Killer du jour in America. So a lot of that feeling. And the fun thing is, I notice, is that we're going to just call it the Dent Schoolhouse, but it was subdistrict number 12. It closed in 1950. So there would not have been students disappearing in 52 and 55 because they weren't there. And it was just, so there's inconsistencies in that legitimate history of the building.
Right. And not that I don't want to poke holes in the Dent Schoolhouse, because it is my ultimate favorite haunted house.
It's quite a favorite in the tri-state area.
And it is a creepy building. Like, when you're walking into the basement, and it's just,
All that
musty.
asbestos.
Yeah, it's musty. It's damp. It's cold, and then you have fake dead bodies hanging from the ceiling, and it just is creepy. And I love that, as long as it's not real.
Well, it's really popular. I couldn't find, maybe you know better, how long it's been a haunted house attraction.
Pretty sure 1979, 78, around when WBN started.
Okay.
Because it originally started as, I think, the Boy Scouts. It was just a hodgepodge, them throwing it together, and it just became popular, and it just continued all these years. And at one point, 97.3 took it over, and then the people who have it now, I think, took it over in the early 2000s, and now it is what it is, and they've done a fantastic job with it. Honestly,
it's a good haunted house. It's been sold out every weekend because they are open through COVID, but with far fewer numbers. And it was just very interesting trying to find the haunted history of this place, because there just wasn't a lot of history recorded about it. So it was really a perfect place to do a haunted attraction with an overlay of an urban legend. Or folklore, as some of us folklorists would call it. But it just lends enough credence that people are going to believe it, even though the timelines aren't meshing.
It doesn't match up.
Yeah.
Well, and
it doesn't really matter.
No, but if
other than children really didn't die,
children went missing. Like, I just watched the Atlanta Missing Children documentary on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
They knew their kids were missing. They made, it would have been a huge deal. It would have been all over the news. I work at the Enquirer. It would have been, I would have been there for 15 years. I would have heard about it at some point. And I really wanted to go into the office today to dig in the physical files, but I haven't been in the office in a while. So
welcome to our Hometown Haunt segment of our podcast, where we share your stories that you send to us about your own hometown haunts. I know last week I talked about my haunted Mexican restaurant in Mishawaka, Indiana, and Jen shared about the Exorcist house in St. Louis. So time for you to share your stories. So if you want, you can send them to our email address, which is cincycuriosities@gmail.com. We will provide that down below as well. For those of you who are listening, it's spelled CINCYCURIOSITIES@gmail.com. So our first submission is from Bradley. It takes place somewhere in Ohio at some time. And he writes, I had just finished my paper route, the Salem News, and was heading home down Pritchard. Joey's coupe was parked out front of their house. As I passed it, it started rolling down the slight incline of the street, keeping pace with me. Because of the evolution, elevation of the sidewalk, I could see it was empty. I stopped, for obvious reasons. It stopped. I started walking again. It followed me for another 15 to 20 feet before stopping again. But mind you, this was the middle of the afternoon, so it was bright enough that I would have seen if anyone was crouched down inside the car or on the other side pushing it. Joey and his girlfriend, Sarah, were both pranksters, so it was not inconceivable that they saw me coming and decided to punk me. But the profile of the car was too low to even allow that. And that's what Bradley wrote. Thank you, Bradley. That would be sweet.
And Brad's an artist, so he's done a lot of role-playing game writing and illustration.
And he was haunted by Christine.
Exactly. He probably would like that. One of the games he wrote was It Came from the Late, Late, Late Show.
Oh.
So. This one is from Anne. She says, when I was 2 to 4 years old, we lived in a house in Slatington, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Sorry.
That's okay. That was haunted by the builder. When my parents changed things in the house, without talking to him, things happened. Footsteps, turning on burners, broken windows, levitating toddler.
Ooh, fun!
Apparently, he and I had long chats in the basement too. My folks told the people who bought our house what to expect, and they didn't listen. We came back, and they had removed all the landscaping and installed floodlights because they were sure it was vandals.
And they never slept again.
I like that they figured if they would move all that, it would stop everything.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's an interesting, but I mean, what else would you think it would be? If you're getting, levitating toddlers, that's probably a slightly, and I kind of want to, ask Anne more about this because that's kind of a levitating toddler kind of, it was almost like yada-yadaing. It was like,
yeah. I may have levitated one or two times when I was a toddler.
I mean, that seems like an interesting, just thought.
Yeah, it listening to her story though, it's a lot of very common motifs that you see in hauntings where you have toddlers talking to somebody that no one else can see, footsteps, turning on burners, turning on TVs, broken windows. The thing that amazes me is the levitating toddler. That why aren't we harnessing that power? Why isn't that helping with human flight?
Exactly. We need to ask more about levitating toddlers.
Yes. And speaking of toddlers chatting to other people that no one can see, Christina, please read our final story.
Yes, there's a lot of that. I mean, like you said, it's a very common haunting. This is from Charlie, and she's talking that it was April of 1983. We had just moved into a new 2-bedroom apartment in the Imperial Beach, California. Our firstborn daughter was 6 weeks old. After settling in, the second or third night we were there, we would catch glimpses of someone in our daughter's bedroom. We were having difficulties keeping the hot water turned on in the bathroom just off her room. This went on for several months. Just glimpses here and there, and the hot water shutting off every time we tried to wash our hands or shower in her bathroom. When she learned to walk, she would stand on her toes inside the doorway and chatter for hours. Just normal chatter, no tears, no laughter, just chatter. We were not worried that this was someone or something trying to hurt her, as her tone was always calm and the fact that the hot water would not stay on. When I was 7 months pregnant with our second daughter, January of 1984, my husband, in the Navy, had barracks duty and was gone overnight. Our oldest daughter had fallen asleep, and as I was getting ready for bed, something changed in the room. Not cold or smoky, just a feeling I was not alone. This happened for several weeks, always on duty nights. When I was about 2 weeks from my due date with the second daughter, my husband was on duty and I couldn't sleep. Something was just not right. Nothing frightening, just off. I called my husband to feel better about being alone. I was 19 about the time and not that brave. I looked up, and standing by the door next to the dresser at the end of the bed stood a young red-haired boy about 17. For some reason, I was not scared, but my husband was a bit shaken on the other end of the phone. The boy just smiled, waved, and vanished. The next night, I went into labor and had our baby girl. The water stayed on in the bathroom off our oldest daughter's room, and she, I didn't have that. Never stood there chatting again. It was rather sad. Later, she said, after researching, we found out a young Irish boy had been killed on his bicycle in front of what was now our apartment building. We never did figure out why he was always shutting off the hot water. Is water stuff like that a common?
Yeah, it's pretty common. There's a lot of theory about spirits and water. It's what I focus more on is the toddler talking to a ghost, basically. And yeah, it's pretty common. I'm kind of disappointed my son doesn't talk to anyone, but I guess I don't live in a haunted house, so.
Well, maybe that's
no, you tell them to all get out.
That's true. I did.
That's true. You've already expended all the spirits.
I was just
They're
like
gone.
out.
Yeah.
But yeah, toddlers talking to unseen ghosts, to the ghosts of grandparents is pretty common. The other thing that happens is toddlers will also talk about past life experiences from time to time. That happened to a friend of mine. And if the toddler is able to vocalize it enough, they can tell you who they were, give you actual names, and people have been able to look back and find stories that correlate. So they'll tell you, like, the kids will tell you, like, I died in this horrible building fire, and parents will research it and find indeed this building had a terrible fire, and somebody died and they were able to point out who they were in pictures. And it actually is very similar to how the Dalai Lama is picked. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
It is. My brother did that when he was 2 or 3. He
Really?
would say to my mom, "Don't you remember when I was the mom and you were the kid?"
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah. And he doesn't remember doing it, but my mom certainly did. And I was just like that. And I think when I was young, told my mom I was a dog.
Yeah.
So maybe I was a dog in a past life.
Do people tend to be entangled?
You can. There's been stories about that. Being a dog in a past life, if you're Buddhist, that is quite clearly a possibility. So, because you have the wheel of reincarnation. So, and you can get promoted to being human or be demoted to being a hungry ghost or a vengeful spirit. So,
well, maybe being a dog is not necessarily a demotion. It might be. It depends on.
No, it means I was a very good dog and I got to be a human next.
Maybe you were Lassie.
But maybe it's not a demotion. I mean, it was kind of like that joke in Hitchhiker's Guide where people thought they were smarter than dolphins because they did so much stuff, and dolphins thought they were smarter than humans because they didn't do anything.
Yep. So long, and thanks for all the fish.
Exactly. So perhaps, it's just our narcissism that we think we're smarter than other things, and really everything else is smarter than we are.
Could be. And mice could be trans-dimensional beings. So thank you everyone for joining us for the second episode of the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Hometown Haunts podcast. If you would like to get in contact with us, there's a variety of ways you can do that. You can email us at cincycuriosities@gmail.com. That's Cincy with a Y. Or you can find us at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram or Cin Cabinet Curio on Twitter. And one of us will find your message. And if you have a hometown haunt you would like to share, please email them to us. But you can also message us on probably Twitter and Instagram, though we may not find you as quickly. But please follow that, and also follow all of those handles on social media for our progress with our Kickstarter for the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities Comics Anthology, issue number 1, which will start kickstarting, what is it, October 5th, Christina?
Yes, October 5th.
Yeah. So, we'll start that October 5th. And thank you for joining us. Stay spooky, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.